In this lesson, we're going to be discussing how threat actors attack our organization's physical security using something known as brute force. When discussing the security of our organizations, you'll often hear people use the term brute force as a commonly used attack method. Now, whether we're talking about physical security or cybersecurity, the term brute force really does refer to a type of attack where access to a system is gained simply by trying all the possibilities until you break through. For example, if you're trying to guess a person's 4-digit bank card PIN, you could begin by trying 0000. If that didn't work, try 0001. If that doesn't work, try 0002, and you keep incrementing your guess 1 digit each time until you finally figure out their PIN, which could have been something like 1423. Now, in this case, it could take you a lot of time because you have to try over 1,400 combinations to finally get to 1423. But the point here is that eventually you'll be able to guess that 4-digit PIN because there are only 10,000 possible combinations ranging from 0000 to 9999. Now, in the realm of physical security, we often have a more specific meaning though when we talk about a brute force attack, and is much more of a violent method than you may have initially been guessing about. Now, when we talk about brute force in terms of physical security, we are focused on forcible entry, tampering with security devices, confronting security personnel, and ramming a barrier with a vehicle. First, we have forcible entry. Now, forcible entry refers to the act of getting unauthorized access to a space by physically breaking or bypassing its barriers, such as a window, a door, or a fence. If an attacker is targeting a window, they might use a rock or some heavy tools to shatter the glass. Some more advanced attackers may even use a technique known as glass cutting to create an entry point by cutting a large hole into a large plane of glass and then walking through that hole. To prevent this type of brute force attack against your windows, you should select reinforced or laminated windows to provide better resistance against these types of brute force attacks. Another common barrier that brute force is used on is doors. If your facility uses older or poorly constructed doors, like those interior bedroom doors in your house, they can actually be kicked in or broken down with enough force by simply kicking it or punching it or using a blunt tool like a battering ram. Now, when it comes to doors, the weakest point of a door is actually its lock, so many brute force attacks simply focus on breaking the lock off the door, and then they can simply open the door and walk through it. To prevent this type of brute force attack, you should select high-strength doors with deadbolt locks, metal frames, and a solid core. Fences are another common physical security barrier, but they can also be climbed, cut, or even rammed down if they're not built with robust materials. Also, you can use electric or barbed wire in your fences to provide some more protection, but a determined intruder will still find ways to neutralize or bypass those things, such as placing a rug over the top of a barbed wire fence to be able to climb over the top of it without cutting themselves. Second, we have tampering with security devices. Now, brute force attacks aren't always about destruction, and instead, they sometimes involve manipulating security devices to create new vulnerabilities that could be exploited. For example, a security gate is designed to control access into your facility, but if an attacker can force them to remain open using an object or tool, this provides an easier way to bypass the security gate. Similarly, security cameras and sensors can be blinded with paint, lights, or by using mirrors to create a physical redirection of their line of sight. Also, your sensors or alarms can be smashed or disabled, which can render them useless. To protect against these kinds of attacks, the key is having redundancy in your physical security measures. By having multiple layers or backups of your security measures, you can ensure that if one line of defense is compromised by an attacker, that your other defenses are still going to remain operational and online. Third, we have confronting security personnel. Now, one of the most aggressive forms of a brute force attack involves the direct confrontation or attack of your organization's security personnel. This is by far one of the most egregious attacks that you're going to find because it's not only a criminal act, but can also be a life-threatening act towards your security personnel. Often, your attackers will employ distraction techniques, physically assault your security guards, or even use weapons to overpower your facility's security guards or other security staff in order to gain access to a building. To mitigate against this risk, security personnel often undergo rigorous training in both conflict resolution and self-defense. Additionally, security staff should always have a quick means of communication to call for backup or alert others of a potential security breach or attack. Fourth, and finally, we have ramming barriers with vehicles. Now, this is another dramatic and destructive form of brute force attack that's going to use a car, truck, or other motorized vehicle to ram into the organization's physical security barriers, like their fences, gates, or even the side of the building. Most of our organizations aren't going to be subject to this kind of attack unless you work for the government, the military, or a particularly interesting target for an attacker, something like a bank that has lots of money or valuables on site. Now, to help defend against this kind of an attack, you should install bollards or reinforced barriers to prevent vehicles from being able to drive into your facilities. These bollards are specifically designed to absorb and dissipate the energy of a fast-moving vehicle that is crashing into them in order to prevent the vehicle from reaching its intended target, like the inside of your facility. So remember, brute force attacks in physical security are a direct, often violent approach to bypassing your security measures. Brute force attacks exploit the physical vulnerabilities of a system, whether it's through a window, a gate, or even a security guard, to gain access to your facilities. By understanding the different kinds of tactics that an attacker could use to conduct a brute force attack, you're going to be better prepared to develop a robust, multi-layered physical security plan to protect your data centers and other organizational facilities. Always remember, while brute force attacks are considered to be a pretty direct and brute method, their simplicity can often make them highly effective as an attack method against poorly defended facilities.